Hello my friends and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Each job has risks associated with the duties you have to perform. And in this case I have the journalists who expose themselves to great risks being in a war zone. This article comes from obviously Ukraine and Russia war, and we find how many journalists lost their lives in the past 5 months of war. So this article comes from Ukraine Forum, and this is the title. It comes from today, the 25th of July 2022. Journalist dies every 4 days. Russians killed 37 media representatives in Ukraine over 5 months. Now, it's very interesting that it doesn't say how many die killed by the Ukrainians. I'm assuming 0 because their bullets are just avoiding the journalists. Okay, we have 5 months into the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Russian military killed 37 media workers. That's according to the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine. And I'm quoting, "Among the dead are 8 journalists who performed their professional duties. 12 media workers perished as civilian victims. Another 17 mass media representatives were killed in action after being mobilized to become part of Ukraine's defense forces," the statement reads. Very deceiving so far. The only ones that really were the ones that were performing their professional duties. Those were 8, which is a lot. It's not how these guys say every 4 days one dies. Well, 17 were killed in action of being mobilized as part of Ukraine defense. Well, you're regular military then. But every 4 days a journalist is killed as a result of the Russian war in Ukraine. So this article first doesn't tell me, is not really concerned about the journalists, it's concerned about the journalists killed by the Russians, because I have a hard time to believe that accidents don't happen and people are not killed from the other side if you're in the middle of it. But if you're on the Ukraine side, obviously the other guys shoot at you, so I can see that as being shot by the Russians because you're on the Ukrainian side, obviously. I wonder how many are killed from the other side. But sometimes these guys say things that really make you draw the conclusion that they don't really care who dies on the other side. All that matters is who dies on my side. And that drops half of the feelings that you might have, sympathy feelings towards this side. Because if you think that those guys, the journalists over there, are not journalists because they're covering the other side and somehow they're enemies or something, I'm not saying that these guys are, this is the Ukrainian media, the national whatever journalists and so on. I understand that. But it was the example with grain deliveries, for instance. They were all concerned about the grain deliveries from Ukraine to the rest of the world because the rest of the world was starving. The Russians were blockading. But the Western countries imposed sanctions on Russian grain. So Russian grain as well was not going to the people who were starving. But they were okay to not allow the Russian grain to go as long as Ukrainian grain doesn't go. So they really didn't care about those starving people, because otherwise they would say, oh, you can go and we're going to see what's going on with your Ukrainian grain. Maybe we can do something. And they did. So the same here. You care about how many are here. All right, maybe the Russians have their own numbers. I don't know. This is what I got from this side here. So the latest victim of the Russian aggression was Mykola Rekok, an author and news editor of the Infocar outlet, who died in a battle with the Russian Wagner PMC mercenaries. Can you make it even worse? Can you say it? This gentleman died in a battle with a Russian Nazi battalion led by a guy who took Adolf Hitler's name. Can you make it even worse than that? Or maybe he's a son of a great grandfather or grandfather who actually was involved in the mass killing of bam 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 boom boom. You know what I mean? Can you make it worse so we can feel, oh, it makes me jump, on the other side, when I hear how these guys are making these things sound, it's like, I don't like this. Why don't you report? No, but they pick this kind of words. Oh my God. Yeah, so it's the mercenaries. How do you know those are mercenaries? I mean, what else can you find worse than that? Nazis or what? Or what? The Japanese in the Second World War? Or we can't talk about that because now they're our allies. Or what? Anyway, according to Serhiy Tomilenko, the NUGU chair, Ukrainian journalists are primarily Ukrainian nationals, therefore seeking, it's very small written, that's why I'm like, therefore seeking to protect their homeland, many media workers left their pens and notebooks behind and took up arms. The NUGU expressed great respect to such colleagues of ours. Well, it says on July 5, the spokesperson of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, Alyona Matveyeva, said that the national police had initiated 46 inquiries into the crimes committed by the Russian military against journalists. Well, I don't know what to say. I would tell you, I will tell you this. Think about a truck driver. I will give you this example over and over. A truck driver, a regular truck driver, however you want to look at the truck driver. He drives a truck. Every time that person is driving 65 miles per hour, which is about 75 kilometers per hour or something like 80, something like that, or drives 70 miles per hour with a truck, with a, let's say, semi-truck. If that person makes a mistake, or someone else makes a mistake, he's dying. He's gonna die with that big rig behind him and on it. So there are risks associated with every job. These guys, I'm not talking about the ones who enrolled in the army and say, I'm gonna go and fight. There's a different one. But the ones covering with the cameras or whatever they have, that's a different story. They're courageous, they went over there, they knew what they exposed themselves to. It doesn't mean they have to die, or at that point, because they will die nevertheless. We all die, right? But it's just I don't know. I don't want to be so heartless to say risks are everywhere. That's part of your job. You go in a war zone. You know, things could happen. Nobody has to die over there. As I'm talking about journalists, obviously. But nevertheless, I would, things happen. And I'm pretty sure, as I said, it's not only on this side, it's on the other side too. So we should decry both, not both, any journalist who dies caught in a war somewhere. But it's risky business. But what they do that? Various motives. Thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.